So, Austin, in your new venture right now in business and life, what has been a lesson that you've kind of navigated over the last few months? Like, we're into Q1 of 2024. What's been something that you've had to navigate and pivot with?
The reality of truly starting over was a lot more than I thought it would be. I think that's kind of the lesson that I've taken more from the last kind of 18 months is it's been a long road of trying to kind of figure things out again, because in one way you have, I had an older business that kind of everything was already set up. Systems were there. The content to generate a lot of leads were there, crowdsourcing from the internet from all areas, all social platforms. And you had a steady flow of what made sense. And with the new thing, it's definitely been interesting to navigate kind of starting over again, like I mentioned, and also just trying to really consider what I want from the thing in general, because when you when you're kind of just keeping something going, there's a clearer picture of, well, this is just what it is, and it's got a trajectory. It tends to be more successful when we do this or we do that, and you don't. It's in that sort of operation. It's more of you're turning an aircraft carrier, right? It's very slow moving, but like as we've talked about, I think we've even talked. It's like it's more of like a jet ski at this point. Like you're just turning quick, and you're on a dime, and if you have an idea, run with it. If something's working, run with it, and trying to figure out, just knowing that decision. You can get decision fatigue really quickly of like which direction do I want to actually take this, because there's so many directions I could. So I'd say that kind of encompasses the last 18 months for me.
And I'm curious, man, because we'll dive into what you mean by starting over, but
Hmm.
that whole concept at its baseline for you, like a homeostasis every day, does it feel more daunting or liberating in the sense that you now get to build something from scratch with all the lessons you learned prior and kind of build it in domains that like you see most fit for your wants and needs in life? Like,
Yeah.
where's your baseline that? Because I'm sure there's an ebb and flow there of like doomsday and then also very highly motivated, but I'm curious where you're landing.
Yeah. No, it ebbs and flows, right? That's kind of the world of entrepreneurship. Is some days are great, some days are not great, and I think a big part of when things feel daunting, it typically, I would say, coincides with mental health not being in a great spot. And when things feel really exciting, that also tends to correlate with mental health being in a better spot. And so it's trying to find a better home base with that mental health, and trying to have a better understanding of where it's truly at. And so I think I don't want to get too deep into that, but it's essentially the daunting parts tend to come when the mental health is worse, and then the more exciting bit tends to come when mental health is better. And so I think that's the best way to kind of describe it.
And I totally get that, and I understand the struggle to kind of put words on that because
Yeah, it's tough.
we've talked a lot about your business and also like TF2, and I've shared a lot about how like Google's algo updates have literally royally messed up like a huge vertical of the business, which is the website. And
Hmm.
100% I agree with the sense that on days where I do feel more off, having like weirder mental health days, like those are the days I go into spirals. And then I'm just
Yeah,
like, I need to like get out of my head because I can't get myself out because everything else feels so dang like grander at the moment. And I'm
yeah,
curious, and I've built up some systems on my end to kind of help navigate that. But I'm
yeah.
curious, like when you're having those off days mentally and stuff, like what are some of the tools that you've implemented to kind of help yourself work around that? Because I've talked to a couple community members in TF2 who are going through some stuff that's similar, whether it be with building a business, huge life transitions, but basically navigating kind of those like mental days where things just feel more grand. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm curious, like what other, like what tools have you kind of built to kind of navigate that, dude?
Yeah, I'm still working on tools, I think. Um, it's sort of I think we have these tools and we have these systems within us that we've sort of learned how to cope with certain things throughout our life, um, and help build resiliency around when we kind of face different things. But I kind of compare my recent stint of mental health with like you never read the same book twice, and it's like it's almost like I'm coming back to the same book, but it's a different. It reads differently, right? I'm in such a different place of life this time around, and that's kind of what I mean when I say like starting over, because like obviously I have a huge runway of momentum and reputation and credibility and all of that, and I'm not starting from zero. But it does. The daunting part is it feels like I've returned. If I could put it into words, it feels like I've returned back to a familiar book and I don't recognize any of the words. Like I feel like I never have read it before, and that's more or less, I think, what I mean by starting over. Um, and it's gotten easier when it's turned from months and weeks into days that are kind of poor mental health, I would say. And so, just to be honest, and so it's now that it's more days, it's easier to cope. Like that's an easier thing because I can just go do, or I can just get away. I can go out in nature, maybe spend some time just away from my office and away from the thing itself. Or if I know, because sometimes the only way out is through, right? And that's often the only way out. And so at some point you're going to have to face you're going to have to face the thing and, eat the frog, whatever. And so for me, when it's turned more into days, it's become easier just to kind of like, let's just work my way through it and just go do things that I know are productive. And then the feedback loop helps a lot. So I think too, when you get really in your head and maybe you kind of take some time away from putting things out into the world and engaging with the community, engaging with people who you are actually helping with stuff and your content and things you share. When you get, or at least for me, I tend to be fairly avoidant. And when I get in these headspaces, I tend to just not create, and which in return then kind of ends that feedback loop of people engaging and positively reinforcing that effort that you did put in. And like, because like even recent, like this past couple of weeks, I put out more content, and it's been very reinforcing and encouraging because I've gotten a lot of good messages and comments and stuff like that of like, oh, this was super helpful. Like, thank you so much. And a lot of great DMs and just people sharing. And it's just like, oh yeah, that's why that's a huge part of why I do. Like, I love that part of it. I love that positive reinforcement of it. But when you're not creating, you lose sight, you lose the relationship with that positive
Totally.
reinforcement, So that's been a big, I think a big tool is just kind of like the only way out is through, and just eat the frog and engage with the work, because the more you engage with it, the more it'll engage with you. And for me, that's definitely helped kind of pull me out of the swamp that I feel like I've found the quicksand.
It's interesting how that works, right? Because I do the same thing too, where like when I get in those spaces, like the last thing I want to do is be on social media. The last thing I want to
Mm-hmm.
do is like be like replying to comments. But it's ironic because like we avoid that, but then it's like that's the thing that actually helps pull us out of it. And it's
Yeah.
just like, how do you get that ball rolling a little bit on those days to where you do feel like so out of it and you're like, this is the last thing I want to do? When in
Yeah.
reality, that will help pull you out. But like getting that ball rolling is tough. And also, don't sell yourself short there with the runway comment. I heard that where you're like, oh well,
Yeah.
like I have a don't sell yourself short, dude. I'm sure because of that, you likely feel a lot of pressure too, though,
I do.
on the
Yeah, and
sense
that's
of like,
that's been a big part of it, man. I think a lot of it, I'm realizing that more and more, where I do think I've held a lot of fear around there's pressure that I put on myself to be a version of myself, or live up to who I think I need to be or should be, and the content I should be producing, and all of that. And it's based off of maybe a past content that I've produced, or where I should be at this point based off that content. Because some of it feels like I'm kind of taking steps backward as far as maybe production and quality and all of that. But at the end of the day, it's like that doesn't matter, dude. And that's just what I've had to, and guys like yourself, man, you're a huge inspiration to me. Of just, you're just a doer, and that's been a massive inspiration. Obviously, all the conversations that we've had around my new venture, my new businesses, and your thing, and like how many times we sat down and just chatted for hours about this stuff. And again, you're a consistent source of inspiration for me when it comes to just do it, just put it out, just do it, create it, make it. It's going to be messy, and then you can make it better later, sort of mentality. And I say that with all compliments, because obviously your thing is, you just crushed your thing, and you seem to always crush what you do. And I think a big part of that is just, you're just a doer, man, and you get it done, and you do the best job you can at that moment, and you move right on, and you come back to it if you need to. And I think that's brilliant, and it's been a huge inspiration for me.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but yeah, man, I like that. That internal pressure is tough, and especially like, I don't know if you're similar in the sense that, like, I put so much, and this is something I'm working on in like therapy and stuff, and like kind of trying to back myself away from, but I put a lot of my self-worth on the success of the content I'm producing and on my
Mm-hmm.
business. And so when like things are all over the place, things are in a lull, I find that I can get really down on myself and then apply more pressure, which also then takes away from the fun of everything. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, as you're getting into this venture, you're now over a year into it.
Mm-hmm.
Are you noticing that maybe the pressure and the stakes are a little bit higher in your head right now versus like when you started and you're like, well, I don't really know what I want to do. But now you're like, okay, like I know I'm this far in, like, let's
Yeah.
get ripping. Like, which is the direction? Like, how are you navigating that? Because I feel like in the first, like, whatever, 2-3 years of building a business, there's like such a crazy ebb and flow of pressure and everything else.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, how are you navigating that now? Because I've been looking at the content, it's looking great, and it seems like you're like getting a nice direction that you're heading in.
Yeah.
So is that like helping in any way? Like, where are you at?
Yeah. No, I think I'm finding a flow with it. I'm finding my voice again. I think a big part, especially with producing content online, and especially video content, like talk to camera type of video content, as you very well know, it's like, if stuff isn't clicking, if it doesn't feel right, it just doesn't feel right. There's rarely anything you can do that just makes it feel good in the moment. And that, I just feel like I've been stuck in this, like, I don't know how I want that, what that voice is. Like, I haven't been able to find what that voice is, and every time I kind of go back to it, and like the how-to technique video is sort of like my bread and butter. Like, that's what I'm most known for in many circles. And like, it's what I am really good at, I think. And I think I put a lot of pressure on myself there, because when I haven't been able to find that voice, and for things to click and sound natural and flow, because when it's flowing, it's going natural. It's like, you could film an 8-minute video succinctly, and it's a one take, and you're like, all right, let's move on. That was great. And now, over the past few months that I've started to really start to film more and more again, it's, I'm take 7, take 8, take 9. And it's like, this is so unlike me that I like, why am I, and then I get super in my head. I'm like, why am I messing it up? Like, do I actually know what I'm talking about here? Like, do I need to just go back to square one? And I think there's so much there, that I've had to unpack, but I think just taking the pressure off has helped considerably, because it's sort of just like, I've realized that pressure isn't in fact beneficial or it's not productive at the moment. And it's been the thing that's crippled me, I think, the most over the last year. And so just taking that off has helped, honestly, and just starting back from square one, and remembering that, when I'm filming, I'm talking to one person, have that person in my mind, just like I would with my in-person client at the gym, which I do. Like, it's so natural for me to just explain something to a client at the gym, right? And I don't skip a beat. I don't have to take multiple takes. Like I just say the thing, and I think that's helped a lot where I've just, that perspective has shifted again, where I'm not trying to create this masterpiece. I'm just trying to create something that's helpful. And as I get better and better and at that again, I think, or find my rhythm with that again, the more creative I get with it, right? So I get more ideas through that too, because you're like, oh, I could say it like that, or oh, I could also film it this way and break it up this way, which could be a little bit more engaging or could be more helpful or whatever. And so I think taking a lot of that pressure off has certainly helped with that process.
It's almost like going back to like being a true beginner in some ways, or like just
That's
having
been
fun again.
Dude. So that was the other part that I forgot to mention was, as much as I hate to admit it, I think my ego has been in my way for the past year. Yeah, no, it's as much as like I don't lead with an ego. Like anyone who's met me, it's like I don't lead with that. You don't get that when you meet me. Hopefully you don't. I definitely don't lead with that. But it's like that doesn't mean, just because outwardly I don't lead with that doesn't mean internally I don't lead with that. And that's been a big thing I've had to realize of like, I'm pretty prideful, and I want the thing that I'm doing to be the best thing that I can do. And if it's not, then that feels less than, and that feels kind of crippling in many ways. And so I think kind of truly letting that ego go a bit and allowing myself, because I also didn't, at the beginning of this new journey, I just, because of where I've come from and what I've kind of produced in the past or created in the past or had in the past, I didn't allow myself to be a beginner, right? And I think it's really what's changed up to this point, because not allowing myself to be a beginner again has really, in a lot of ways, I think stifled a lot of things that could have happened over the last 12 months if I just would have allowed myself to do it and sink my teeth into that. And now that I've started to kind of just go back to that beginner stage and just go back to square one and kind of drop that ego, just lose that pride and just say, hey, dude, this is where you're at. Just be a beginner, feel what that feels like, learn what that's like again. And it's just going to make you better at what you do, not worse. So that's been very humbling, I'll say.
It's a tough one, man.
Yeah.
And like, because we all have egos, and it's a matter of how much is that to our own detriment in many ways. So I get that, because, dude, everything you're saying is resonating so much with me right now, because I'm pivoting TF2 so hard, and there are so many things that I'm trying and playing with that I'm just like, I know nothing about this, but I'm gonna try to figure it out, I guess. Like, it seems like it's okay. It seems fun. It seems like a right direction, or at least a fruitful direction to at least learn from. But it's tough, man. It's really tough battling that. And I'm curious, how did you notice that? How did you realize, like, what was a point where you were like, okay, like I need to get because I have moments where I'm like, Jake, sit the fuck down. Like,
yeah,
you're like, you're not as good as you think you are. Like, take off your fucking expert hat. Like, go back to the root. Like, what kind of hit when you were like, okay, I need to like shift gears a little bit and go back to like being that true beginner? Was there a day when you were filming, for example? Was it a period of time where you were like, you know what I've been doing is not working. I'm getting in my own way. I'm putting too much pressure on myself to like my own detriment. I'm not creating now, and now I don't even know what direction I'm in. Like, was there like a time frame, a moment that you kind of were like, okay, I need to adapt this mindset all over again?
Yeah, it's the second thing that you said. The second thing you said basically represents the last year of my professional life, especially. I've just truly things that have worked in the past stopped working, and business isn't where I thought it would be by this point. And I've had, knowing when you're going through it, like when you're in the heat of the moment, it's really hard to obviously take a step back and see it, right? But when you're able to kind of reflect on what's just been your reality over the past year, it's like, oh, okay, well, none of this has worked as well as I needed it to work to keep this thing running. So it's okay, well, what's next? I can't keep going down this road. Like something has to change. And I think it's just been a slow and steady realization, again, that coincides with just my mental health starting to be in a much better place than it was. Because again, like when that's in the toilet, it's just really hard to have a clear 20,000, 40,000 foot view on anything. Like your boots on the ground, you can only see what's in front of you. You can only see that it's not working. You can only, like, that's the only thing you can see, right? But if you're able to kind of get yourself out of that hole a little bit, even just a little bit, you're able to kind of like levitate yourself. If we could use the metaphor, like our visual, it's like you start levitating up and you make it to 5,000 feet and you're like, oh, there, okay, I kind of see. And then you go up to 10,000. You're like, oh, okay, yep, all these things are no good. I need to get out of my own way. This is where I keep getting in my own way. And so, yeah, it's definitely the second thing that you said there. And it's just, it's such a big part of getting out of your own way, being a beginner again, realizing what you're doing isn't working, and that's okay. You know, I think that's been a big part too, where I've kind of been in a position where from the beginning I needed it to work and it just hasn't worked as well as I needed it to. And that's been a bit frustrating. But also looking back, if I truly asked myself the question of like, well, have you done everything that you could do? Have you tried as hard as you possibly can to make it work? And I can only honestly answer no to those two questions, right? And so that is more or less just you having to look at yourself in the mirror and asking, like, what are you made of? Like, do you actually want this for yourself? Do you want this for your life? And you got to be honest with yourself, and you have to then back that up with doing the work then. And I think that's kind of the place I've gotten to now. It's okay. Like I'm looking myself in the mirror, you know, and it's like, yeah, everything that you have in you to give, you haven't given, right? And that needs to change first and foremost. And as soon as that starts to change, the other shit is going to start to make a lot more sense. And you're going to find something that works or is working.
Dude, I love that. You know, it's funny when I was in San Diego last week, a big conversation I was having with the boys is basically I was considering doing this part-time work for another company to basically help them build up their asset. They're not in the fitness industry, which I actually liked a lot. But I got to a point where I was like finally in kind of this headspace to where I wasn't being reactive and like kind of like being like doomsday, like, oh my God, like TF2 is dying, it's dead, blah, blah, blah. And it got to a point where I was like, I haven't realistically given this enough time with all of my effort to justify building someone else's thing at this moment, you know?
Yeah.
And that's like something that I just needed to have like kind of just like click in my head. And now it's like, it's funny because I feel like this week, literally this started this week when I got back, has been like this kind of like, I was like opened up the window and I'm like, okay, like, we're going back to like 13-hour work days to figure this out and like trying to chug and just fucking be a doer in that sense. But I so hear that because that is something that I feel like I've been going through as well. So it makes me feel good knowing that like, it doesn't make me feel good, but it makes me feel like, right? I'm not, comforting. It makes me feel like I'm not like out of my mind in many ways.
or we're both out of our mind.
We're all a little fucking mad at this point, dude. Yeah. But let's give some context here. So when we're talking about starting over, can you give a little bit of a rundown on what you're building at the moment and just a little bit of your coaching background as well and like who you are?
Yeah. So I've recently started a brand around my book, Science of Strength Training. I published Science of Strength Training in 2021, and it's been successful in every metric that I would ever dream of it being successful in. It's been one of the best-selling weight training books across the globe over the past couple of years in multiple languages, German, Korean. In terms of languages, it just got translated into Persian. It's been translated into 10 plus languages. And again, it just like stays at the top of the bestseller list as far as weight training books go. And to every sense of a success, like that's huge, right? And it's easy to lose sight of like, oh, that's been good. Okay, great. But scienceofstrengthtraining.com is the brand. So I'm building a brand around that book. And the goal with that is essentially to help expand the resources available that that book could not deliver on in 224 pages. And so there's only so much space for certain things to be said in that book. I think I said things I needed to say with the space that I had. But that said, it's like, when we're thinking about, well, how does strength training impact bone health? Well, I only probably had 1,000 words to speak on as far as bones go and bone health goes and strength training's impact on it. Well, we all know there's a lot more to be said than 1,000 words or less, or 750 probably, on bones and the impact that strength training can have on our bone health as we age. And so it's things like that, right? It's taking a little bit more time and space and giving that content and information more space and time to be fleshed out and described and better understood, hopefully by the reader, in more context and nuance as it relates to certain different things in their journey. And so that spans across all things strength training. And so the kind of the tagline of the website is like your trusted source for all things strength training. And so my goal with the website, more or less, is to become just if you're a person interested in strength training, like, this is your trust list. This is where you go. Like, this is a dedicated site that's for you. I'm not writing to impress anyone here. I'm just writing to help and hopefully continue to expand on the content that people seem to have resonated with in the book so well. And then from a coaching perspective, that I've been a coach a lot longer than I've been a writer. I wouldn't really call myself a writer. It's funny that I wrote a book and published a book that's been successful because, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I'm still learning this, but I don't even always understand how to correctly use grammar and like where to put a comma and a colon, and like I'm still learning the subtleties of actual grammar and all that, because I just didn't learn it when I was younger. And I work really hard to try and be better and better and better at writing and expressing what I have in my head and getting it onto paper. But I've been a coach a lot longer, and I think that's helped me become a better writer, because I write how I speak. And if there's one thing that I've been good at across my career, it's articulating what I'm trying to say in a way that people can understand it, and at a level that people can understand it, right? I'm trying to meet you where you're at. I'm not trying to talk over you. I'm essentially trying to take you from where you are now to where you want to go, with whether that's through coaching or whether that's through the information that I share. And so from a coaching perspective, I've been a personal trainer since 2013. I started training people online in 2015. That was after I earned my IFBB Pro card in 2014 in men's physique. And so I had a professional competing career. I started coaching clients more and more. I was coaching people in person and online. And then, I've coached everyone from, a 70-year-old woman who's looking to be around longer for her grandkids, to bikini athletes stepping on the Olympia stage, to professional athletes, to WWE superstars. Like, I've just coached a lot of different people. And I've also educated. So I've worked for companies that educate. I worked for N1 Education as a educator and coach for them. So I held seminars around the world with them, teaching other personal trainers on program design and anatomy and all of that stuff. And so I've had a long, diverse career as far as kind of the little circles that I found myself in the little niche areas of the industry I've found myself in, which has been, I think, up to this point, kind of confusing for me to put all those pieces together and create something that makes sense moving forward. I think that's been a big part of that too, where, it hasn't been like, oh, I just started the online business and like that took off and that's just all I've done. I've just kept getting better and better at just doing that. Basically, in my career, the theme is like, as soon as you start something and it becomes really successful, you say okay, and then you try something else. And so I'm very much a try something else kind of guy, and that's been great for many things. But as far as creating a business that's probably as big as not big, but I don't care about a big thing, but creating a business that's consistently successful across my career, a little bit harder, because there's been very few things that I've given truly the time to marinate beyond like, oh, here's some success. I'll stick in this for a couple of years, live a good life. Great. All right, let's move on. What's the next thing that I can kind of poke my head in and challenge myself with? But when it comes to business, we all can probably understand that's not a good tactic to approach it with.
It's interesting. It's interesting hearing that because, like, in my mind, like you're one of the most knowledgeable coaches I know and everything, and you have all these sick tools, and then you circle back and it's like, dang, like he's feeling a little bit like in disarray right now. And then I think folks who are listening to this, whether you have your own business or not, or if it's just in life or in your career, and you feel those moments of like, oh, like I must be the only person feeling like this, like nobody else, like these people who are so much further along, like they don't feel like, no, like we're all just fucking figuring it out and feeling these things often, to say the least. But I'm curious, and I feel optimistic about everything going on right now, because it seems like in the lead up of your business right now, it's like you've almost kind of like, yeah, you've tried a lot of different things, which sure, like might not have led to this level of like consistent success, quote unquote, that you've put it. But I feel like they've almost kind of like groomed you into a point where now you could build something with a ton of longevity, like fully by you and how you want to build it, right? Where it's like started here, did this kind of thing with partners, did this thing with a company, and you're like, well, like getting kind of groomed into like picking out like, okay, what did I like about this? What did I not like? What did I like how that was run? What did I not like about that? And now it's like you're at a point where it's like, cool, I have all of these data sets. How the heck do I put them together to build this thing now that I am truly proud of, that I fully own, that lives and dies by like, you know, my hand. Whereas it's scary when you don't have that in prior ventures, which stinks. But I'm curious, like, does that kind of make sense? Is that kind of on the head of like where you're feeling hopefully with that? Because I see such a huge upward trajectory of everything with the book success and with how you carry yourself, I think, in the community. And I don't know, man, I'm just like, I'm stoked for you. And it's cool, like that you're at a place right now where you're like, okay, let's figure out that voice in that direction. Does that make sense? Does that ramble? Is that on the money?
No, it does. No, it does. It does a lot. And I think that's been a big part of that ego and starting over and kind of just all of that I've shared. And that's more or less what I mean. I think what that encompasses more or less, where, you know, I'm 30, right? I have a long career ahead of me if I want it. I've been very, very active in my 20s. Like my entire 20s were spent trying to get myself to this point, essentially, right? Trying to get myself without me knowing. Like and I think the big part of my 20s, which was like, as you probably could extrapolate from my short storytelling of it, it's, I started in the industry when I was 19. That was 2013. I started in the industry when I was 19 years old. I was pro bodybuilder by the time I was 20. I interned at all these different places. I interned at this St. Vincent Sports Performance in Indianapolis, which trained like NFL and NASCAR, like IndyCar drivers, and like you name it, they train them. And so I've been there, and I've been an intern at like MI40 gym back in the heyday there. And then I've worked for these big time educators, and I've started these own other successful ventures. And all of this happened in my 20s, right? I wrote the book in my, it's like I did all these things in my 20s. And I think now, again, hindsight's 2020, and being on the other side of that and being able to kind of like slowly peel myself out of this quicksand, like I feel like I've been in the past year and a half, that I am able to finally see that of, oh, well, all that just led you to here. And now you get to take all of that and just package it and do what you want with it. And I think a big part of some of the confusion around that has been there are so many directions I could take it. And so I've basically spent the last year trying to really mull over and refine what that is. Because I think I also feel the pressure of that on my shoulders, where it's like I realize where I'm at, and I realize how many directions I could go with that. And I think that in and of itself has been a bit crippling, because in my 20s it was always, oh, the next thing is this is the next thing, or oh, this is the next thing, and it's always been more clear of, well, I'll just stick my head here and stick my head here, and just do what I can do there and see where I'm at after that. And now it's more or less like, okay, I'm done sticking my head in different things. My head's only in my thing now. And as liberating and freeing as that can be, I think it also can be fairly crippling, and it has been crippling. But I think that's more, if you look at like a pie chart, that's a sliver of it. And I think I've just been stuck in that sliver, unfortunately. And I'm finally I think I've started to crawl out into the abundance of what could be more and more. And that has become more and more clear to me now, to say like, okay, this is all what led me to this point. Now, dude, just run with it, have fun, like be creative, like do all the things that you could think of doing, and see where that goes, and I think at the end of the day, it's again just returning back to having fun with it, because I think I lost sight of that for a while, and I was stuck in that for a while. So having fun with it again is just starting again, being a beginner, dropping the ego, have fun with it, be creative. If you have an idea, go with it, run with it. It may not work, great, pivot, try something else. And so yeah, that's been a huge part of it.
It's like, it's a classic. I feel like, and I hate saying this because I don't really believe in it, but it's like the law of attraction thing, right? When you started your career,
Yeah.
you likely wanted to build this sick business all under your own power or whatever else. But through your 20s, you kept following things that were enticing and very interesting to you. So then that kept leading you to better things, because like the law of attraction, it's not a real thing. We're just like, that's just you
Yeah.
thinking about and doing the same thing that you want to do, and eventually figuring that out and getting there. And it's like people credit law of attraction way too much. It's like, actually, it's like the decade of work that I did following things that I was really passionate about that would eventually lead and like set me up to things that I thought would, I don't know, be the best thing. And now it's like interesting that you're coming out of all of that, because it seems like where you're at now is likely where you eventually wanted to go, and like the pie in the sky. And now it's like, holy shit, I'm here. Like,
Yeah.
what do I do now? Like, like, which direction? Like, where do I go? Like, there's nothing, like, I have no constraints. Wait, hold on. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like I get it, dude. Like, it's a lot to like refine, but it seems like the culmination of this last year has at least allowed you to take a lot of those data sets and like, start to curate. And I think that's the harder thing sometimes versus, I don't know, like I feel like folks all get in their own head of like, oh, like I'm not where I want to be, but like you're following paths that feel right at the moment, and that kind of gives you that like sense of purpose. It might not be exactly where you want to be, but
Mm-hmm.
it's ironic when it's like, okay, now you're at a place where you've always wanted to be, and it actually feels more daunting. Why is that? Is it because it's under your full power? Is it because
Mm-hmm.
like there is no other like external thing that can kind of distract from that? Like
Maybe.
it's so interesting, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think a big part of also, you know, also like when we talk through kind of like all the things that I did over the last decade, I never really had, I just never had an idea of where that would end. I really didn't. I've never truly had like an end goal in mind. I've always been someone that just kind of like goes towards my interest and seeks out challenge and seeks out what I think the next logical option seems to be for me in that moment, to help me be a better version of me and be a better professional version of me. And so in my 20s, like I never even like even starting the business, the original business back in college, like that was solely an endeavor of, I don't want to leave campus anymore. So like, how can I leverage me being a professional bodybuilder with some traction I have, this is back in 2014, going into 2015. It's like, how do I leverage the position I'm in with being a professional bodybuilder, with having a following on YouTube, having a following on Instagram back at that point. And it really was me just like, I don't want to leave campus to go to work anymore. Like, I just want to be able, like, I really care about school. I really care about doing good here. Because college was the first time I ever truly was able to tap into whatever intelligence I have academically, or from more of a like IQ rather than EQ. Like, I've always had a high IQ in sports or physical activity or physical expression. Like, I've always been very high in IQ in that, and I've always understood that. I've always had a lot of my ability to express myself physically, like through sport and movement and being coordinated and athletic. That's never been an issue for me, ever. Like, I don't remember a time where I ever had trouble with that, or didn't thrive in that. But intellectually, I did not tap into that or know how to tap into that until I got to college. And so, I went from like a C average student to a 4.0 student. I mean, that was the contrast of, and that was like me just putting in the work and putting in the effort and studying for hours and hours a day, every day, on top of competing, on top of working, on top of everything. And that built up so much momentum, where I just truly had this deep self-belief that I could do whatever I put my mind to. And what that allowed me to do was to kind of just put my head in different things and thrive in it. And again, like, to go back, like, I never had a goal of like, oh, this business will be this one day. It's like, no, this business's goal is to help me not leave campus. This is to help me pay my bills, to buy supplements, to buy food, to be able to lift with my friends when I want, when I can, and be great at what I do now. And that just grew into something else. And the more it grew, the more I almost didn't recognize what it was, because I never set out to make something like that. Regardless of it happening, I'm grateful that it happened, because there was a lot of opportunity and financial stability during that time. But it's like that's never what I set out to do. And I think that's why I always kind of found myself poking my head into different things, was because that was never my goal to begin with. My goal was just to be a better trainer, to be a better coach, to be more clear in my ability to articulate myself within this field, and to be respected, and to gain credibility and all of that. And that's kind of what's led me here, right? So all those ventures, there was never a goal when I went into them that, oh, this is the last thing, this is the thing I want to be known for. It's like, I still don't know what that is. I just want to be helpful. I want to feel satisfied with the effort I put into something. I want it to be able to sustain my life and allow me to live the way I want to live, which isn't asking that much, in terms of my standard of living. And it's just that, and to build a career that's respectable, because if I don't accomplish anything, at least in my head, it's like, I had a respectable career. I was respected in what I did, my field. I contributed positively. There's something left behind that has a positive impact with, my book, for example. Like, there's a physical thing that if I pass away tomorrow, there's something that's positive in the world that I created that helps people. And that truly is like the defining factor of what I deem as success, right? So with that, it's been tough to kind of land on something, because I don't have this vision of like, oh, I'll create this and this system, and then this will scale to here, and then I'll be able to do this. And that's just like, that's an afterthought to me. And I'm having to more or less lean into whatever that afterthought is now, because I'm in now a position where it is all on my shoulders. I don't have any assists, right? And that's great, but also I'm also left with that, and so it's like, okay, interesting. Because this is the first thing I've really kind of truly gone out at myself with, I've been a big part of different things and done a lot in different things, but it's It's never truly just been me in many ways, right? And so I think that's something I'm having to cope, like get used to again, or get used to in general. So hopefully that made sense.
No, it does, and it's an interesting feeling, and I totally get where you're coming from there. But it seems like you said something there that kind of like hit me, and that I'm going to think about more today. But it's the idea of like, okay, I don't necessarily know what this like end thing is now that I've kind of been thrust into thinking about that I've never had to think about before. But I know what I want to do, and I know what interests me, and I
Hmm.
almost feel like right now with TF2, what I've been trying to do is not think about metrics, not think about the size of the site, the size of the channel. I think I've been trying to think and like dial it back on like what gives me purpose and makes me have fun with what I'm doing, because that's usually my best work. And
Hmm.
these things that I'm like equating this work to don't necessarily correlate. Like a video that
Hmm.
gets 1,000 views but impacts 1,000 people directly, where they reach out, they ask questions, yada yada, versus this
That's huge.
video that on paper looks super successful because it gets 100K views but doesn't like do all the stuff, and it doesn't like make me feel good about whatever I might have created. Like it's this weird thing of like, okay, are we putting too much pressure on this? Should we actually just dial it back and just kind of go back to square one, which is create to create and have fun and just like do it? Because like it's funny because now that I'm doing that, it's interesting seeing like, look, like has have things bounced back entirely? No, but there's like this little bit of momentum starting to pick up in different ways where like I'm like, okay, like I'm starting to feel a little bit more optimistic about this, and I'm just having fun again. I'm not even
Yeah.
putting all my eggs on one basket, all this like huge grandiose goal on being back to where it was, yada yada, because it's just not going to happen. So that I think I'm going to think on that more today, and like the fact that I don't know, you're similar in the sense of you've led a career by acting on what's interested you and what feels good, and that's created your best work without having necessarily this huge pressure on this like end goal. I
Hmm.
feel like is something I'm going to keep thinking on today, because that's where I'm at as well with TF2, and that's what I think I need to kind of like dial back and think about, which is just just have fun with what we got, and like keep that in perspective.
Yeah. And to be honest, like I share your site a lot. I know I tag you as much as I possibly can. Obviously you're my friend, but I also like your stuff is really good and it's very helpful. I just, yesterday I just linked your article talking about barefoot shoes versus training shoes to one of my clients because she was asking me about it. And I was like, oh, here's an article that my friend Jake wrote that is going to be way better than I could articulate as succinctly and as organized as he has right here in this article or this video. And so here it is, and I don't, just for like reference, and this obviously this will click, but it's like we lose sight of this. I don't refer people to you because your site is big or because you have a successful business or because you have a large channel. I recommend people to you because you have great content and you're a likable person that I know they're also going to like, and that the the value you provide versus the time investment needed to get that value is so manageable and approachable and realistic for them, right? Like they can go through some of your videos and like they'll within an article or two, they're going to truly understand, oh, this without the bullshit, without gimmicks, without me you trying to sell me on anything, without some big media corporate ideas behind it. Like this is just a guy who loves to train, who wants to give you good information on training shoes and equipment and gear, sharing his accumulated knowledge to fast track you to best understand the thing you're searching for without any of the other fluff, right? Which is rare, right? Because like you go to these bigger sites, you go to these things that maybe land higher on Google in certain terms of search. Like, okay, great, like you expose them all the time. Like it's like, yeah, these trashy Payless Pumas are not the answer to your CrossFit dreams. Like they're not, right? It's probably this little niche company that is crushing the game right now as far as whether it's, the Rad Ones or any of those other kind of like niche companies. I'm forgetting the other ones, but there's so many of these smaller things that are, whether it's Zero or whatever, it's like there's so many niche companies that are shoes and markets that exist that I never knew existed until I met you, until I started following your stuff and like consuming your stuff. Like I truly never knew it existed. And how would I? Because like I'm not just going to go down these rabbit holes of Google and try to suss out like, oh, is this men's health article actually trash? How am I supposed to know that? Until I find your work where I'm like, oh, this is a lot easier to understand. Like, it's so much more attuned to the frequency in which I'm trying to tap into. Like, I know, because like also, and you kind of see that you're exposed to this as soon as you start to produce content for these bigger brands and bigger sites and companies. Like, you're exposed to the game that you're playing there. And a large part of how you write that article or film that piece of content isn't about you. A large part is just about them. And that's their business model. And you're just the customer of that business model, right? And obviously we're both trying to build businesses here and to sustain a life just like anyone else with a job. But we're doing it in a way where you are the centerpiece of that. And through us providing value to you, we're then rewarded for that, more so than just you are rewarding us for us giving you a sliver of value just to kind of rope you in with a good headline and some good H2 headers, right? It's like, okay, but once I get there, was it helpful? And I can confidently say, like, I'm so confident in sending everyone your way when they ask anything about shoes, because it's like, dude, I couldn't even in a decade probably get to where you're at with your knowledge on this stuff, right? And it's like, yeah, he's your guy. Just go there, you know.
Thanks,
and so that's more or less like it's truly. I've never once recommended anyone with the thought of like, he's got a big channel, he's got a great brand, he's got a good successful thing going. It's purely been on the merit of he's a good dude and he produces good shit, and this is going to give you the exact answer you're looking for. And that's the only metric of what I'm grading that on, as far as like, would I recommend someone to your stuff?
Appreciate you saying that, man. That part, I'm like blushing right now, and you could tell that I'm not good at taking compliments because I'm like totally trying to deflect, yeah. Right? Oh yeah, 100%. But I'm trying to be better, and I thank you, and that made my morning, dude.
Well, I'm glad. Yeah, I mean every word of it.
I'm optimistic about both of our ventures, in the sense that I feel like as AI continues to roll out, as these media companies continue just to be even more behemoths and monopolies in many ways, and they just continue to accrue all of the eyeballs, I am hopeful and optimistic that there will be a subset of people who will eventually get sick and tired of that. They're going to hit a threshold of, I'm tired of being marketed to. I'm tired of just hearing topical shit on the bench press from these media companies that write the same fucking article 16 different times with different headers, but yet Google continues to eat it up and give them a ton of traffic and ad money. Like, I'm optimistic that as you flesh out the vision of the site and you build that thing and you build it into, I know what you want it to be, people are going to be able to find that and connect on it with a much deeper level than what's out there now. And I think that's what like gives me hope, and that's what gives me optimism. Is it ever going to be as big as the behemoth media companies? Who knows? Who cares? But at the same time, like, you don't need a lot to build a sick life and have a cool community of people who genuinely care and connect with you. And I think that's where I'm excited to see you go over the next couple of years as you build out your thing, because I think there's going to be a need and a good subset of folks who are looking for exactly what you're trying to build. Because I think we're going to hit a point of getting tired of seeing, to your point, the topical stuff, the high volume stuff from the people who don't really give a shit about you. They're just wanting your eyeballs for ad money and affiliate money or whatever it might be. They're doing some sponsored content. But I'm optimistic, dude. At the end of the day, like, as much as I like to doomsday in the evening, in the mornings, I generally start pretty damn optimistic.
That's why I record podcasts in the morning. I'm a much more optimistic person in the morning.
If we were talking to 8 p.m. right now, I would probably be telling you about how everything's doomed and I'm fucked.
Oh, same. Completely. I would be like, this is not working and this is broken, and I'm going to apply to work at King Soopers. Like, yeah. I mean, if you talk to me at 8 p.m., my message changes a little bit, but the version of it's sort of like the monkey brain, right? There's two versions of you that exist, right? there's and I don't know, I think both of them are you, but right, like if you have a voice in your head, that's also you, right? But also, is that you? I don't know. It's got to be though, right? But it's that person of like, I want to get out of bed. I'm going to get out of bed tomorrow at 8 a.m. or 6 a.m., 5 a.m., whatever it is. And 5 a.m. rolls around, the alarm hits, and you're like, oh, I wanted to get out of, I set this alarm. The person I wanted to be set this alarm. And the person that I am right now, that my mind is telling me I am right now, is going to ignore this alarm and stay in bed. Or I'm going to stay true to that person that set the alarm, and I'm going to get the hell up, and I'm going to do the thing I promised that I would do, right? And there's two versions of you there, right? And I think it's just trying to go forward and listen to that voice, that version of you that wanted to be something, that wanted to do something, versus the version of you that's keeping you from doing the thing that you wanted to do in the first place, right? Because both aren't going anywhere. Both are always going to exist. But the more I've been able to befriend the version of me that tries to keep me from doing the things that I want to do, the easier it's gotten for that voice to be more friendly, to say, hey, remember that thing that you wanted to do? You set that alarm? Let's go ahead and get up, buddy. And that's a lot more complementary to living a life that I think you want to live day in and day out with that intentionality, right? And I think that goes back to what that law of attraction truly is. It's sort of the law of serendipity coinciding with intentional action over time, right? It's just your ability to be intentional with something that you wanted to be doing that leads to inevitable opportunities that you never thought possible, right? Like my opportunity to write the book came from me writing 3 different articles for our tiny little website that no one ever read. Truth, like that's what got me that book deal. And my ability, like my opportunity to even write and publish that book, was I wrote 3 articles that I wasn't very sure on. I almost didn't publish. And, you know, I wrote them in a way where I was like, it was like a mix of conversational and academic writing, and like it was scientific but more conversational, and it read how I was thinking about it at the time, rather than me trying to write it to impress someone, right? Again, I was just trying to be helpful, and that was then rewarded. Ironically, the thing that always got me bad grades in school was the thing that got me an opportunity to write an eventual best-selling book. So I think you just have to follow that intentional action, and the more you can befriend that voice in your head that is keeping you from the things that you want to be doing, and turning that into someone who facilitates the things you want to be doing, is a worthy thing to spend time doing, whether that's therapy, whether that's meditation, or a combination of many things. Like it's a worthy thing to pursue and reflect on and try and intentionally approach every day with.
You're such a dang good communicator. Like, I'm not gonna say shit after that, because that's the perfect outro. Like, that's a perfect summary of this podcast and everything. So I'm not even gonna try to add anything there, because that was perfectly articulated, dude. But it's been a pleasure chatting. And before we wrap this up, where can folks find you? Where can they connect? I'm obviously gonna have all of Austin's show notes, or all of Austin's info, down in the show notes. But yeah, man, where can we find you?
So scienceofstrengthtraining.com is the new website, the new venture. If you guys want to check that out, I think the website came together really nicely. Starting to add content to that, more articles to that, more and more. There's 2 up there now. One's on the difference between barbell deadlifts and barbell back squats. Like, what's the difference? Why would we choose to use one over the other depending on our goal? And then there's one over pre-workout nutrition. So basically how to eat before and around your workout to build muscle. And so those are the 2 up there now. So if you're interested in any of those topics, those are up there. They're both about 10 to 12 minute reads if you got 10 to 12 minutes to spare. And then, Instagram is kind of where I hang out. So I'm just Austin Current on Instagram. I'm the guy with the beard. And I just talk about lifting and and how to be better at lifting and be more confident in the gym. So
Well, dude, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate you coming on.
likewise, man. Thanks for having me.